Well, let me ask you this and back up on something that you just said, 2nd Street. Now, is that the address of Lizzie's house or the Jose? Which address is that?
Oh, so that's in Fall River. So that's the murder house.
Okay, now you ready for this? 2nd Street
is there
is
soccer?
also the address for Villisca Axe Murder House
Oh.
and the Sally House. Second, the 2nd Street.
Really?
Yes. We're doing tonight's show, I must say, we're doing it about axe murders. And of course, we're going to talk about the Axeman of New Orleans, and we're also going to bring in Sam Baltrusis. And for those of you who know him, I'm so excited about him being here also. He is a descendant from the Lizzie Borden family. He's the author of several books on the paranormal, including The Ghosts of Salem and related to evil, and has been on several TV shows on the Travel Channel. And so, Sam, thank you so much for being on tonight.
Hey, doing great. I'm excited to be on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Sam, let me tell you, he's the king of the Paracons. I think you were just in Sleepy Hollow. Is that right?
Yeah, Sleepy Hollow. This year I did there's a big one called Michigan Paracon, and I did that recently as well. I'm producing my own Paracon coming up, the Massachusetts Paracon. It's going to be in Plymouth, Massachusetts, coming up the last weekend in September.
Oh, that's going to be great, and I can't wait to hear more information on that. Now, Todd, you have wrote a book also that I have with me here called Axes of Evil.
Yes.
Now, you go into about the Axeman of New Orleans, but also want us to kind of talk, we're going to talk about that for a little while. I just wanted to do some introductions first so we all know who, I mean, y'all don't know who I am. I just walked in here and sit down. No,
right, okay.
And, so I want to talk about the Axeman of New Orleans, but also, I have some theories too about Villisca and, so many Lizzie Borden and so many of the axe murders. I'm just like, you know what? Let's just do a whole show about axe murders.
Sure, yeah.
Because it also goes with my theme of unsolved murders. Because if you think about it, Lizzie was found innocent.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. Not guilty, I should say.
Right.
Not innocent, but not guilty. And, so we have that. Also in Villisca, no one was really, Reverend Kelly was put on trial, but he was found not guilty. And then the Axeman of New Orleans, who knows? So they all have that. They have many things more in common, but the not guilty, and I guess if you are suspected of axe murder, you just kind of like, you're good? You're good?
Yeah, it's a great American pastime, certainly.
Trains.
Oh, yeah.
Now, just like Crowley and Rain, and they have like a train track connection on there. Let me ask you something too, Sam. So Lizzie Borden, she... the Borden murders happened it was 1892, August the 4th of 1892.
That's right.
Right. I'm wondering if some of these axe murders that came after maybe was inspired by that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the case, so Lizzie was acquitted for murdering her father, Andrew Borden, and her stepmother, Abby Borden. However, the trial was sensational. It was the crime of the century. So it was talked about by everyone. So yes, the talk of copycat murders, I do find it kind of interesting that the weapon of choice was an axe or a hatchet throughout multiple murders throughout the country, including Villisca. So inspired possibly, or maybe it was just that the weapon was more accessible in the late 1800s, early 1900s than it is today. I mean, today we don't chop wood for regularly. So I think it's more of a sort of like a lot of people had axes at that time.
And what's something I was doing in my research that I found, it may not be anything, but I'm like, if you're into numerology and all that, if you'll notice that all the murders like Villisca, Axeman, I can't pronounce that word. I mean, it's not related to these, but it is an axe murder in Germany. What's that? Kafferdeck or you know what I'm talking about?
Right.
All these were in odd numbers. I mean, even numbers.
Okay.
1892, 1912, 1918 is when all these murders, axe murders, were in even years.
Yeah.
Like I said, it may not be anything. I'm not a numerologist, but it was kind of interesting when I realized it when I was going through things. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Do
when you
you?
brought up numerology, I find it really fascinating. So, for example, so 1892, when the Borden murders happened, it's the 200 years prior, there were the Salem witch trials.
Ooh,
So that was in
Oh,
1692.
16. You are correct. Yeah.
wow.
So that I find that interesting. I also find that so another I wanted to throw out this as well. So there was Bertha Manchester. So I've connected with Lizzie so while filming Curse of Lizzie Borden, but also her spirit. And she kept saying Bertha Manchester. I'm like, who's Bertha Manchester? Well, actually, while 4 days before Lizzie Borden's trial, there was another axe murder that happened in Fall River near the Borden house on Second Street, and Bertha Manchester was killed in a very similar fashion with a hatchet as well. So, so the thing is, I feel, the person supposedly was caught. His name was Jose DeMello. However, I don't feel like he did it as well. So, as a clairvoyant, I feel like that there may be something. I don't, not to get into conspiracy theories, but my theory with Curse Lizzie Borden is that Lizzie physically did it, but she was taken over by something darker. Like I say possibly a family curse, but sort of like an energy that compelled her to do it. Like she wasn't in her right mind. She doesn't take responsibility for the murders.
Well, let me ask you this and back up on something that you just said. Second Street. Now, is that the address of Lizzie's house or the Jose? Which address is that?
Oh, so that's in Fall River. So that's the murder house.
The
That's the location where the murders took place in 1892.
Okay, now you ready for this?
What
Second
what's is
Street
there a
is
shocker?
also the address for Villisca Axe Murder House
Oh,
and the Sally House. Second Street.
really?
Yes,
Okay, that's fascinating. Yeah, like
three
I
three of the
yeah.
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 I mean, Sally House wasn't like an axe related thing, but they have 50 actually. Sally House and Villisca have the same 508 Second Street, the same the address. But now that you're saying that in Fall River that one is also a Second Street, do you know the? I'm sure you know the numericals on that, or
Yeah, I don't know, actually, at the top of my head, I don't.
do you
But
mind
and
looking that
also
up?
too, like what it was when it was recorded in 1892. It's
Mm-hmm.
different. The street numbers changed. So
Sure.
I'll get back to you on that. But
Okay.
I do feel like there's some odd like connections, whether or not it's just serendipity and it's like coincidental that it's happening. But even the dates and just sort of the way that the murders took place. I mean, the ferocity of the Borden murders, the fact that it was Abby whacked. I mean, the story is that Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her father 40 whacks. It was not 40 whacks, but it was close to 40 whacks. So the savagery, the crime of passion involved, to me, implies that possibly Lizzie Borden, like there's other things going on if she was in her right mind or she wasn't in her right mind when it took place.
Right. And I just actually honestly got chills that there's three places with the same street address.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, even the heinous connecting with the spirits of Andrew Borden and Abby Borden. Abby was not a wicked stepmother. She was a real person. So I get emotional every time I go back to the murder house in Fall River. I get emotional for them, but I also get emotional for Lizzie as well because I feel that she's kind of given, because she's a woman, she was ostracized, lived a pretty miserable life, even though she was acquitted. Pop culture, turned her into the ultimate, villainous,
Hmm.
and so I feel like there's a lot of scapegoating going on, and I feel that the innate evil is out there, whether or not it's paranormal or supernatural, or if it's actual people committing these heinous crimes, whether it's racially motivated or it's socioeconomic motivated, which is the case with Andrew. He had a lot of enemies as well, so there are people that could have targeted him specifically, and possibly my distant cousin Lizzie Borden could be innocent, and she
What
wants me
about
to prove her
Bridget?
innocence.
What about Bridget? I know
Yeah,
you mentioned.
Bridget's been considered too, and that's the thing. Bridget was there, and so was Lizzie. So Bridget was said she was asleep upstairs while the murders took place. Having investigated that house multiple times, that seems kind of far fetched to me. Like that is really like you slept through two heinous murders that happened in the house, one floor below in the case of Abby and 2 floors below in the case of Andrew. So Bridget, I feel that Bridget and Lizzie potentially they could have had, the rumor or the legend is that they had an affair, that there was sexual abuse, which I strongly, and I'm in the school that possibly there was sexual abuse perpetuated towards Bridget, and also towards Lizzie Borden as well, and probably Emma too, from Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not proven; it's not fact. But the facts are that you know, I feel that if you really know Lizzie or Lizbeth, as she likes to be called, she didn't have it in her. She also, and something that came up in my research for my book, she was a Sunday school teacher, and a couple of weeks before the actual the murders, actually it was a month before, she had her hands crushed by a dumbwaiter at the
Oh.
church, and this was in the church's newsletter. Miss Lizzie Borden, daughter of Andrew Borden, was injured at church from a dumbwaiter, and although she didn't have her hands broken, the fact that she was injured before the murders, to me, it's suspect that she couldn't physically do it. And she was a small framed woman, so
Mm-hmm.
the fact that she was accused and acquitted, part of me feels like that there's no. I always say it's not. I'm 99% sure that she actually did it, but I'm not now. I'm kind of going back. Maybe something else is at play.
Yeah, because I mean, you actually have channeled her, right?
I channeled Eliza Borden, who was another
Right.
perpetrator who killed her children, and that so on the show I channeled Eliza. I don't channel Lizzie. I kind of keep
Okay.
her away from you. She's a little sassy,
But I noticed
Someone.
that you talk about her like in the present tense.
Yeah, like she's my friend. I
Right,
mean,
right, right.
I picked her out, like when I've not only have I communicated with her, but I've also I've gotten EVPs during the filming of Curse Lizzie Borden. The question that my producers wanted me to ask was, Lizzie, did you kill your father and stepmother? And I say it, and on the recording you can hear her crying in agony, like,
I'm a good
stop
daughter.
asking me that question. Stop asking me. I didn't do it. I didn't. You can hear her screaming in agony, like, stop asking me that question. So not only was she tormented after the murders, but she was tormented in the afterlife as well.
Yeah. Oh, because was it? I'm trying to remember. It was it on your show when? But I'm a good daughter.
Yeah, like she wants people like me to prove her innocence so she can cross. So I don't. I feel on a spiritual level, she keeps getting called back, whether it's to the murder house and through investigations, or her where she loves, which is her later in life home called Maplecroft,
Right.
where I feel like that she actually resides. If you want to find a location where Elizabeth is, but I feel like that there was a split of some sort. There's a crazy Lizzie, as I call it, that could have splintered and sort of psychically imprinted itself on the in the murder house, that is crazy. And then there's sort of the woman that I know, my distant cousin Elizabeth, who her spirit resides with her puppies, by the way, in Maplecroft. So I do feel so. I really thought for sure that Lizzie did it. I really was convinced, but I've even looked into trains and the possibility that there's a tie to Villisca, into the Axemen of Louisiana,
Mm-hmm.
as well. I feel that there's odd similarities. That there was a train depot in Fall River very, very close to the home. And I know it was in 1892 and the murders happened in the early 1900s, but I I I still, my gut tells me there's something going on here.
I really believe that too, and see what you think
Oh,
too, Todd, because you think 1892. All right, and so we have Villisca that was 1912, which was 20 years later,
right.
and then the X Men 6 years. I mean,
Yeah.
depending on the age.
And another thing to point out too. So one of our other cousins who was murdered, Sarah Maria Cornell, she was murdered by a minister as well. His name Ephraim Avery, also right outside of Fall River, and that happened. That happened after. Actually, no, it happened before the murders in 1892. So I do see something going on here. There's like a religious And you also have the people that were accused also were either challenged the status quo, or they so like Sarah Marie Cornell, she was a mill worker who came from a prominent family. She probably got pregnant by the minister, and so that's why he was suspected of killing her. But he was acquitted, like Lizzie Borden, from Avery. So yeah, so she was heavily involved in the church and very pious and religious, actually.
Sam, is there anything that you would like to add before we leave about, you want to talk about your Paracon coming up, or you want to add more to the Axeman theory and how we're solving the mystery here? And
Yeah, I find this conversation really interesting, and it's kind of because I focus mainly on New England, so having other people from other parts of the country discuss their axe murders really is fascinating. And there are a lot of serendipitous things that are coming up in this conversation. So I'm really grateful for that. I think that for me, the one thing that I always and the thing that Clementine really interests me, but also the Church of the Sacrifice. I had
yes,
never heard of that.
me
So
either.
I I'm wondering if the Church of the Sacrifice, could have been had a sort of a Fall River or New England chapter, and that maybe there's a tie to that. So I'm going to look into that as a researcher. But I feel when it comes to upcoming events, so Mass Paracon coming up the last weekend in September. Go to massparacon.com. I have a book. You mentioned the Sally House called Fueled by Fear, where I go to the locations that terrified me the most. So the Sally House, the Conjuring House, the Hinsdale House in New York,
Oh
and
my
I
God,
go
all those are
to
my
these
bucket
locations.
list.
Yeah, they all terrified me, but I did it. I was able to walk through my fears, and also too, like this discussion. I do feel like there are potential ties. So the idea of collaboration with other researchers, other parts of the country, would be something that would interest me in a future book project.
Yeah, that would be great. And I mean, Fuel by Fear, y'all, is not out yet?
Yeah, Fueled by Fear is out,
Okay.
and Related to Evil, where I do talk about the family ties to Lizzie Borden, but also the weird coincidences with other family members, like whether they were either murdered or were perceived perpetrators. But that's the thing, like I feel like a lot of the women, it was the men sort of used the women as scapegoats,
Sure.
and the men, or there was an underlying, there are other people that were perpetrating these murders. So that actually that was kind of reconfirmed that was the case also in down south as well.
I'm glad that we're in communication with each other. And as Chris Fleming said, the perfect thing about you. And he said, Sam Baltrusis is the real deal. And I believe that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank
from
you
the
for
bottom
having
of
me.
my heart, and I will see everyone next week.